Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about some poetry that I read, some poetry that has interested me as of late. It's a bit of an unusual poem, and I don't quite know how to describe it in this introductory session, but the best I can say is it's a poem that is about a bedtime story of sorts, and I am referring to Bedtime Reading for the Unborn Child by Khaled Mattawa. For those who don't know, Khaled Mattawa is a Libyan-American writer who mostly does translation work. He translates other Arabic works into English, and he's somewhat acclaimed for that work. And he's written a number of books of poetry as well. He's also from Libya, and he left Libya in the 70s or 80s to come to America. And he's really good at amplifying Arabic voices of the Arabian world and whatnot. I am particularly happy that I discovered some of his poetry because this poem is really good. It really stood out to me, which is why I'm talking about it today. And so without further ado, let's talk about Bedtime Reading for the Unborn Child. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. Bedtime Reading for the Unborn Child. Long after the sun falls into the sea and twilight slips off the horizon like a velvet sheet and the air gets soaked in blackness, long after clouds hover above the boulders and stars crawl up and stud the sky, long after bodies tangle, dance, and falter, and fatigue blows in and bends them, and sleep unloads its dreams and needs them, and sleepers dive into the rivers inside them, a girl unlatches a window, walks shoeless into a forest, her dark hair a flag rippling in darkness. She walks into woods, her feet light-stepping, through puddles, over hard-packed dirt, through grassy hills, over sticks and pebbles, over sand soaked in day, stone sun-sizzled, over lakes and frigid streams, through dim cobbled streets, darkened squares and dusty pastures. She runs from nothing, runs to nothing. Beyond pain, beyond graveyards and clearings, in the dark the eyes of startled creatures gleam like a herd of candles. They scatter and give night its meaning. What echo of a bell lulled her? What spirit, what scent of a word whose storm wrote her? What banks fell to drown her? Which blood star, which thread of water, which trickle of light, whose heart being launched, whose floating soul seduced her? What promise did it make her? Whose memory burned her? Whose prayer did she answer? What help, what sorrow clot, what pain damned inside her? What wall must she rebuild now? Whose treasure beckons her? Who spread ivy like a veil to blind her? Daybreak lies chained to a blue wall from which the stars drop and lose all meaning. She runs past villages that lost their names, roads that lost their destinations, seas that lost their compasses and sailors, rivers that lost their marshlands and travelers, houses that lost their sleepers and criers, trees that lost their songs and shadows, gardens that lost their violet and benches, valleys that lost their worms and farmers, mountains that lost their prophets and marauders, temples that lost their sinners and spires, lightning that lost its silver and wires, chimeras that lost their bridges, minotaurs that lost their fountains. Crescent moons hover above her, ancient white feathers birdless, wingless, lost to their own meaning. Music rises out of her vision. It stands a wall covered with silver mosses. A clarinet sounds a wounded mare. Violins, women who lost their children. Flutes blow their hot, dry breezes. Drums chuckle the earth's ceaseless laughter. Pianos are mumbling sorcerers, calling spirits and powers. Cellos chew on the sound of thunder. Dulcimers skip about on crutches. Dance floors flash their knives, daring their dancers. Words mill about the streets like orphans. Then a lute begins groaning, and dawn loses its meaning. Night girl, your book is full now. You have drawn all the pictures. You have seen many weepers. Stars held your sky in place, and moons floated on your lakes and washed them. When a bird sings, when dewed branches tilt sunlight into eyes, when curtains are soaked with light, when mirrors drown in shadows, take your day to the shore, my child. Put out the words that fired your waking, scatter them on the sand like seeds, then with your feet gently tap them, and let the bright waves receive your meaning. And so that was bedtime reading for the unborn child. In terms of analysis, there's a fair bit to talk about with this poem. First, let's talk about the narrative. It says bedtime reading for the unborn child, which is very strange. It sounds like because why would an unborn child have a bedtime or something like that? So I think it's just maybe the narrator is a father or a mother preparing readings that they're going to read to their child, or maybe it's like a prayer for the child in a certain way, which I'll talk a little bit more about what kind of prayer that could be. But it's clear that the narrator is sort of talking about their child in the future and maybe the hopes that they have for them. In terms of narrative, there doesn't seem to be any real narrative. This all seems imaginary in the poem. But what seems to be happening is a mythical kind of girl climbs out of her window, walks into the forest, and runs and sees a bunch of villages, sees an entire land, maybe magical. The narrator questions what she or what kind of brought her there, what bell lulled her, like what prompted this adventure. And then she continues to run past villages and sees the night, sees the day, encounters a bunch of different things. And then at the end of the poem, she's sort of encountering like a beach of some sort, the end of her journey. And the narrator just says, put out the words that fired your waking, scatter them on sand like seeds, then with your feet gently tap them and let the bright waves receive your meaning. Sort of like give meaning to everything that you just experienced. So it's kind of about a journey, or it could also be about, given that this is nighttime reading or whatnot, it could be just this is what the girl is dreaming in her dreams. You could take it literally as a sort of a saga about somebody, or figuratively, sort of in dreams or something like that. But either way, I do think it's a prayer for the child in the hopes that they will find their own meaning in life. That you're hoping for great things for this young person. And then one other interesting thing about this poem is the use of the word meaning scattered throughout. It kind of uses the word meaning quite a bit, but in different contexts, different ways. In the second verse, it says, she runs from nothing, or runs to nothing, beyond pain, beyond graveyards and clearings. In the dark, the eyes of startled creatures gleam like a herd of candles. They scatter and give night its meaning. So the scattering of these startled creatures helps give night its sort of dark tones and whatnot, I would say. In the next verse, it says, daybreak lies chained to a blue wall from which the stars drop and lose all meaning. Like the stars drop because day breaks, and they lose their meaning when day breaks. You can't see them anymore. And the next verse, the narrator says, crescent moons hover above her, ancient white feathers, birdless, wingless, lost to their own meaning. Kind of like sort of in their own sort of thing, not really part of anything else, I would say. And then in the next verse, words mill about the streets like orphan, then a lute begins groaning, and dawn loses its meaning. So again, talking about something losing meaning through the existence of something else. And in the final verse, it says, put out the words that fired your waking, scatter them on the sand like seeds, then with your feet gently tap them, and let the bright waves receive your meaning. So talking about other meaning and then referring to the girl specifically at the end. And again, I think that's what this poem is trying to get at, is sort of defining the world how you see it, finding your own meaning out of everything, especially when other things lose their meaning, sort of just coming up with your own explanation for how you see the world and how you're going to go about things. And that way, it's a very positive kind of poem of hoping that a child, that when they grow up, they're able to find their way, find their path in the world. And so that was Bedtime Reading for the Unborn Child by Khaled Mattawa. A lot more to discuss in the poem. I didn't even talk about the repetition in the poem, how every verse kind of repeats something in particular, hammering a lot of points home, I would say. Definitely go ahead and read it. I'll put a link in the description. Let me know what your thoughts are. I definitely have a lot more to say, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about this very fascinating poem that is definitely worth reading. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this poem or this poet or Poetry Thursday if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and bedtime story travels. Farewell.